Yes,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that's all
Uh,
right.
we were having too much fun over here.
We're going to get started. Call to order. Um, Affordable Housing Subcommittee is now commenced. It's May 28th at 4:12. We ask commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. Those who have dialed in using the call-in number to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce you're leaving so that we can track quorum. Also, to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. So we have Maggie, Sarah's an ex officio, Marianne, and me, Jim Toffel, are all attending. Serena said she would be with us, but she's just running late. So the first agenda item is the HCD update. So go ahead, Sarah.
Awesome. For point of clarification, I'm not the ex officio. I'm your staff liaison.
Staff liaison, my apologies.
That's okay. But not for long. This will be my last meeting with the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. I have taken a position over in Planning and Development Services that I start on Monday. So I will be a project manager over there, shepherding large projects through the permitting system, assisting with the affordable housing fast track through the system. So I'm still very much tied to housing, but will only be on the other side of the counter again. I gave up being an evil developer, but for good, and I'm going back to PDSD. So Evren Sonmez is in here, and she is our lead planner in HCD, and I think she will be the person who steps in as the staff liaison for the Affordable Housing Subcommittee.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a natural, I think.
It'll be a good fit. It's like the work that I've been doing in a lot of ways, and I'll still help your all's projects, right? Like through permitting issues, if you have those, Maggie and Miriam, both of you, and Jim. So I'll still be able to assist affordable housing and be an advocate for it, just not at HCD anymore.
Okay.
I'm sorry we're going to lose you.
It's okay. I'm still close by.
Yeah, you're definitely a go-getter.
Yeah.
So,
Let Gigi know.
yeah.
Okay. And then as far as other updates, I think we just had generic things on there. There's nothing huge. We're still working through a lot of our development projects. And yeah, lots going on with the middle housing bill. So that's why I encourage you all to attend either tonight's meeting or tomorrow's meeting to just hear about where we're at with that, and the opportunities that will bring as well. So now you can move on, I think, unless anybody has any other questions. Cool.
I'm just reading this, what this thing is for tomorrow.
Read it to us, Jim.
So in May of 24, Katie Hobbs signed House Bill 2721 into law. The bill requires that cities with more than 75,000 residents to allow middle housing on all single-family residential lots within 1 mile of the downtown core. The law also states that middle housing must be reviewed under the same standards and procedures as single-family homes. For any new developments larger than 10 acres, at least 20% must be middle housing. Cities are required to adopt these changes by January 1st of 26. So middle housing includes duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and townhomes, and represents an opportunity to address community needs by providing more obtainable and diverse housing options.
We do also have Nicholas Martell on the call, on the meeting from Planning and Development Services. Nick, are you planning on attending all of these? Is that sort of the goal for you're included on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee meetings?
So for these, I'm sitting in for Corin, who I believe usually shows up.
Okay.
But if you have any questions about middle housing, I'm presenting in that later today. And we have plenty of open spots because it's virtual. So anyone that wants to jump off, or tomorrow afternoon, there's another one.
Are you guys getting any sort of like pushback on this? Is there anybody who's opposed to it or?
So we had our first in-person meeting last week, and it was pretty overwhelmingly positive. In fact, it was more there's more support for it than we imagined there would be, and a lot of people wanted to go citywide on this. So I know the mayor's hesitant to go citywide at first, but I think that was based off of the fear that after passing community corridors tool that there would be some backlash with the neighbors. And there was a little bit of it, but most people saw the need for middle housing citywide as opposed to just that 1 mile radius around the central business district. So yeah, it'll be really interesting because we got very minimal feedback negatively.
What is defined as center city core, I guess, or downtown?
So the state bill left it a little bit open for us to kind of define that ourselves. We have 4 overlays right now that we could use. The actual central business district, which is kind of a smaller downtown area, Rio Nuevo, the downtown, what's the other one? The infill incentive district, and then I can't remember the other one. The infill incentive district is kind of larger, so cover a little bit more. The central business district is one of the smaller ones, so it's kind of the neighborhoods around downtown that would be affected. So we're kind of outlining a bunch of different, I guess, geographies there. One is from the central business district. Another is kind of a more, kind of a less accurate 1 mile boundary, but kind of the more central areas in Tucson. Think like Country Club, Prince, 22nd, Silver Bell-ish. Just to make it so we're not cutting through neighborhoods or cutting through like streets or anything. And then another one is that we just do corridors like we did with community corridors. And then finally, there's the citywide one. If we don't get anything done by January 1st, that would just go into effect January 1st, citywide anyway. And so a lot of the discussion last week was based on relieving pressure from some of the downtown neighborhoods and building all this middle housing as opposed to just allowing it everywhere. And we've kind of worked, and I'm talking a lot, so you can cut me off whenever. But we've worked with the Drachman Institute pretty closely on this. And from their analysis, they don't really think this is going to change a lot in our code and with building because we already allow duplexes and triplexes in most residential zones. It would just kind of be some of those stragglers like the suburban residential R1s where you can't do it, where you'd be allowed to do it right now. So they don't imagine it will change a lot, but it does give us some flexibility, kind of another thing in our tool belt when it comes to building housing and infill, especially.
So there's one thing in here that raises a red flag for me, and that is the sentence that says, for any new developments larger than 10 acres, at least 20% must be middle housing. So that word must says it's going to be a requirement. What does that mean?
So the way that we're reading that is that it must be set us, or we cannot impose any code barriers in terms of allowing middle housing on 20% of new subdivisions, essentially. So what we imagine we'd see is like a plat come in of 10 acres. Otherwise, sometimes we would see a lot of plats with like 3,000 square foot lots or 2,500 square foot lots. Those would all, a developer would have to come in and say, this 20% of these lots are allowed to have middle housing on them. I don't think that's going to happen a lot because I don't think people are going to have really large lots when it comes to subdividing something that large. But we have to allow it to happen. Whether an individual wants to put 4 homes on there or not is kind of their decision. So we have to allow for it.
Oh, it's just so it's saying you have to allow for it, not that they have to do it.
Right. So when they plat, they might have to put a note that says, lots 20 through 25 are allowed middle housing. And then if whoever buys those, they're allowed to build 3-4 units on it if they wanted.
Got it. Okay. Anything else, Sarah?
No, that's it.
All right. So the second agenda item is the work plan for 2025. which is was coming out of our retreat. So, review template provided by SDR. Oh, is that that's the consultants. So create a 6-month timeline to create recommendations to share with CEHD. What do we need to know? Who do we need to hear from? Sarah, do you have that the template provided by the facilitators?
I can see if I can find it. Rachel, do you happen to have it handy?
Yeah, let me grab it. The report out structure should have been is in the last detailed agenda too, so I can send the link to that if that's helpful.
Oh, is it in the agenda?
In the May commission meetings detailed agenda.
Oh, I missed that agenda, that meeting. Um,
I'm gonna
I'm
email
not see-
it to everyone. Sorry, Jim. I'll
Yeah, I'm
email
not
it to
seeing it.
everyone. I don't have the ability to add files in the Teams chat. So I'll send this out right now.
Have you sent it?
Sorry, not yet. I
Okay.
want to make sure I have the right one for the report out structure. Grab the detailed agenda. I should have, it's sent now, so you guys should be getting that in your inbox shortly. I also added the detailed agenda item too, with just like the purpose and the report out structure.
Hmm. There we go. Just came through for me. So where's the template that they're referring to? I didn't, do you know what they're talking about in the agenda? The SDR template? I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, let me pull it up. Should be in the.
Maggie or Mary Ann, do you know what this thing is that they're talking about?
No, I'm looking for it and see if I find it in my notes.
No, I'm not seeing anything, and I don't remember them passing anything out at that meeting.
I feel slightly confused only because I wasn't a part of the commission retreat. But in the attachment in that email, it talks about developing action plans. With homelessness identified as the commission's priority topic, the commission discussed how to focus on those elements. So priority topic, define homelessness. What are the goals of success, collaboration, and then towards the wrap up and next steps is where it talks about the action planning groups. And so I think this subcommittee is supposed to come up with an action plan. And I don't know what the template is necessarily, but I think it's kind of following what's in that email, those bullet points. The group's objectives and desired outcomes, tasks and timeline that we see happening over the next 3 to 6 months. Do we need information, presenters or speakers to help us do any of this? And so I think that from what I understand, that's kind of, I think, what you guys are supposed to do, but I wasn't a part of the commission retreat, so I'm not sure exactly, what the direct outcome is, but I don't think there's like a template that we fill out. I just think that we just have to kind of come up with this plan from our perspective, which the small group, the subcommittees were like refocused. So affordable housing subcommittee is kind of titled housing options.
Yeah,
Right.
including zoning.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay, I just found the correct action plan
Oh,
template.
you
so
did? Good.
I'll resend that out. Sorry about that. I thought
That's
it was included in the.
It's a little confusing, so it's not your fault.
So I took some notes during the retreat, and I sent it to Jay just so we didn't forget about it. But basically, I think what we talked about was we discussed the housing spectrum and defining the different types of housing. We talked about potentially coming up with a housing goal by housing type. So do you guys remember the spectrum? We found it starts with homelessness, the emergency shelters, transitional housing, supportive housing, community housing, affordable housing, and then market rate housing. Remember that housing spectrum graph? So the second thing was we felt like it was important to work with other groups in the same space to try to hone in on recommendations to Mayor and Council, which included the TPCH, the Pima County Affordable Housing Commission, the Arizona Housing Coalition, and HCD. A potential recommendation to the city was to create a centralized database and coordinated entry to ensure that all partner agencies are working off a single shared database to track homeless individuals and match them with appropriate housing and services. And then the last thing was a potential funding source for new affordable housing projects would be for the city to sell half to 3/4 of the individual housing stock, taking the money received, leverage it with tax credits and a loan to build 2 to 5 times the amount of housing in multifamily housing units, which would be easier to maintain over time and provide services. Does any of that ring a bell?
Yes, it does. My question though, and I recall Jim, Marianne, and myself were at a table. And one of the final things that was determined at the mini retreat was the focus on homelessness
Right.
and that being a priority and for something that PCCLT doesn't do a lot with or anything really with. So I'm not sure how useful I'll be.
Well, don't you rent to people who were formerly homeless?
Not anymore. Sorry.
Okay.
Why?
Oh my
Um,
God, it was a
Yeah,
disaster.
you heard my complaining over our whole issue with access, and
Mm,
it was it was a nightmare. So we're no.
So
There's
I
no case
think-
management.
I think that's where you can be helpful, Maggie.
Yeah.
As an owner, of properties and as an owner that has had to work with outside agencies like, Access and DES and Home Inc., those are some of the barriers that, housing providers face because of their requirements and their demands. So while everybody wants us to create more housing and they've got the money for it, they're worse than HUD in terms of tying our hands. And it's often at the expense of the owner. So I think that, you can, bring that to the table for discussion, your experience with that, because it's really valid.
Yeah.
And, in our committee, if we need to be talking to Access and DES and Home Inc., about making changes to be more flexible so that we can build housing and actually run it without killing ourselves financially. I think that's a worthy piece of this.
Yeah, I agree.
all right, so we have the action plan template, and I do remember this. Do you guys have that in your inbox?
Yeah.
So we're saying the priority topic is homelessness.
Yeah, apparently it is.
So objectives and desired outcomes. What are we trying to achieve?
I think, so one objective is that we're able to create living opportunities or living situations for people who are homeless that are geared toward their history, their barriers, and their needs. That creates a whole different kind of housing development. So, it's kind of even a pre-transitional housing, and it's not exactly barrier housing, I don't know what you'd call it, but I think we need to create living opportunities or living situations or living environments.
Emergency shelters, was that what you're talking about?
It's different than emergency shelters. I think that what's not happening is that there's not enough environments being built or dedicated to homeless people with specific issues. So, you know, it's who knows what came first, if it was the mental illness or the substance abuse or the trauma. But by putting them just in shelters, we're really not addressing some of the serious needs people have to actually get back on their feet. So for me, it's creating those environments that aren't trying to do the end all be all. You know, we're going to get substance abuse taken care of, and we're going to get mental illness taken care of, and we're going to get your trauma taken care of. I think we really need to give people back the long-term, I don't know, treatment for their underlying issues that are not going to allow them to do well or be successful in housing. And for me, it's, you know, people having 60 to 120 days or longer of treatment for the things that are holding them up from moving forward, because they don't want to live like this. I don't think people want to be homeless. This isn't a game they're playing. But what we're not able to do is is just build housing. So granted, there is a market of people who, you know, are at 30, 40, 60% AMI that have some barriers, but they're not the kinds of barriers that keep them from being successful in housing and gaining some kind of income. So there's a first step here that's getting missed. And unfortunately, you know, it happened when the powers that be decided that, you know, substance abuse treatment was only going to be 30 days or less. Mental health treatment was only going to be crisis intervention or less. So I don't know what you call it, but that to me is like a first step in a goal. What does everybody else think?
So here's what I wrote, and tell me if I got this right. So create living situations for people who are experiencing homelessness, pre-transitional housing with services for 60 to 120 days of treatment.
Yeah, specific treatment.
I think that's the catch-all that, you know, we fell into. You cannot require treatment or participation in wraparound services in return for housing.
Yeah,
unless it's what? Unless
go ahead.
I think it's like the contract between the I don't know how this works, but between the contract for rent has to be between the agency and the owner. It can't be with the participant itself. So, and I think that's what I'm seeing. I know Primavera wanted to, for instance, rent our Sonora properties, but it's exactly the same scenario that we had with Access, where they will pay for a year or whatever, but the contract is with the client. And if they destroy the property, we're out of luck. If, you know, things like that. And if they don't pay, nobody is responsible for that. And unfortunately, people who are, have these issues along with homelessness, there's just a higher percentage of criminal activity, destruction,
Yeah.
So those are the things that, how do you address those as a requirement for a program? And I think it has to be, so maybe more specifically, more agency-driven type of, types of programs, so that they're not, that's the only way, I think, with some protections.
Did you guys see the fire on 22nd and Country Club at the
Yeah.
old AM/PM?
Yeah,
I drive by that every day. So I was driving by it right as it was getting started, and there was guys on the roof, and I don't know if you guys saw the videos or not, but the whole roof collapsed,
yeah,
and the fire department was really lucky that somebody didn't get seriously hurt or killed in that fire, because I've got a couple pictures of it as I drove by. And there was probably 2 or 3 people on the roof of that building right before it collapsed.
I saw that. It was a miracle. I don't know
Yeah.
how they didn't fall into that.
I don't
So
either.
I think there's two issues, Maggie. One of them is that for the group of people that I'm talking about, it's not housing. That's why I called it a
Okay.
living situation. But you bring up a good point. I think that jurisdictions like the city and the county have a good case to say to, like, Home Inc., who gets this crap load of money from DHS, to say to DHS and Access and Home Inc., we're not going to have leases with these people. We'll have the lease with you, which makes you responsible. So you send us the referrals like they do. They force the referrals on us. But you're going to be the tenant. And so our rent is going to be guaranteed. You pay the rent anyway. It's one master lease and it's a year or 2 years. But
Yeah.
I think that is a really good path that possibly we can take.
Well, and that also allows for required case management. It's
Yeah.
when the contract is with the individual that you cannot force any kind of case management or make it a requirement. So that was the other issue. But yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good
And
thought.
because that was the missing part of it, was there was no case management. No one came around, no one figured this out, and it was us having to figure it out,
Yeah.
and our property managers.
Yeah, because they're really using traditional housing as a program,
Yeah.
but they're not giving it any support or structure. So believe me, we just had, somebody die in one of the apartments that we manage for another agency because of this person, needed a different kind of care, wasn't going to do well in housing, and no one, property managers aren't case managers, and so no one took care of him, and he ended up dying, and it's a crime. So so I think requiring those agencies that are forcing our hand on stuff to be the rentor is a really good idea. But in terms of these other environments, so if I'm a homeless person and there's this living situation, I don't know what it's called yet, for me to be able to get some housing and get off the booze and the drugs, then I'm gonna commit to that program piece as part of the living there. So it's almost like a treatment center, but we're calling it something else.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Which actually kind of doesn't this model go against the whole housing first model in a way? I mean, housing first is about
We're
housing
talking
first.
about homeless here.
Okay, wow,
Not housing first.
all right.
Housing first is the next step for them, for this group of people I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I understand what you guys said here, but so the desired, going back to this action plan template, because I know they're going to be asking about it next week when we have our CEHD meeting, is, so I added to reduce the incidence of people entering homelessness as a desired outcome. Obviously, we want to, I think you guys are okay with that, right? And then created living situations for people who are experiencing homelessness, which is the item that Mary Ann talked about. Is there any other, what other desired outcomes?
Can you repeat those, Jim? Sorry.
Reduce the incidence of people entering homelessness, create living situations for people who are experiencing homelessness, e.g. pre-transitional housing with services from 160 to 120 days of treatment.
It's I'd say, did you say pre-transitional housing?
Pre-transitional housing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? What other desired outcomes? I mean, obviously the desired outcome is to,
Leading to some kind of permanent housing,
yeah,
ultimately,
is
or
to
leading to, I don't know.
have individuals become productive members of society again. And that's
Well,
the ultimate outcome, but I mean, that's, you can't go from A to Z. I mean, do we want to say a desired outcome is to reduce the quantity of homeless people in Tucson? Is that a fair statement or is that naive?
I think one of the reasons Axis, does this type of program is because of the cost. Homeless individuals, the cost to, the emergency rooms and those types of costs are pretty big. And it's, their goal is to reduce that cost. And I think reduce the cost without burdening the houser, because I feel like that's kind of these programs, the way that they're created, the way that I saw in my 7 years of dealing with this, was that they basically pass the buck. They're saying, we got to get these people off the street because, oh my God, it costs so much money to, with the emergency room and the blah, 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 blah. And they ended up pushing it to be my problem, our problem, in all sense of the word. And I think that's the biggest issue. I mean, and I know that they were really didn't want us to leave the program. And in the end, they were really pissed to the point where we had to pay them half of the money that they gave us over 7/10 into the contract. We fulfilled the contract for 7 years. And they said, we can't do this anymore. And they still, I mean, they were upset. They were really upset with us. And they had a lot of misinformation. And there were so many years of it. It was just crazy. So anyways, I mean, as much documentation as we provided, it was never enough. And I think I felt really like our program was used, and we were really pretty dumb. And we didn't have attorneys back then. So it's like, okay, I mean, I was really naive in thinking, we're all in this together. No one's going to hurt us. Yeah, right. So I think that's, I maybe being true partners and collaborators is a big thing from, I think that's really important because I think when the going got tough, we were abandoned for most of the time, and we took it. We said, okay, we're doing something good. We're going, but when it became so abusive, that I felt like it was important that we get out of the contract. Plus our mental health, like literally, it was stressing me out. All the phone calls we were getting from the neighborhood. So,
Serena, what do you think?
Guys, sorry, I've been having really strange issues with the audio, so you guys have been buzzing in and out.
So what are your ideas for, this template and homelessness, which, we're taking on as this committee?
I think that really it's about re-gearing what the Affordable Housing Subcommittee was focusing on before at like the furthest end of the housing spectrum, like kind of filling in the middle to early gaps there and like going away from the LIHTC model that we were focusing on.
So I know this is not going to be a popular thing I'm going to say here, but I'm going to say it anyways. One of the perceptions, at least, maybe I'm not, I'm not as involved as you guys are and some of these things. But there's a perception that the same rules don't apply to people who are experiencing homelessness, and they're able to get a pass when they break the law. And it seems to me like if we really want to do something to reduce the incidence of homelessness, you've got to, obviously there's got to be the carrot where we have the programs out there, but it seems like there's also got to be a stick where if somebody is breaking the law, whether it be, drugs or whatever, that, there has to be repercussions and consequences for that. And, it seems like that doesn't really, maybe I'm being naive. I did the housing study this last year where we went around and interviewed people, and I purposely did where I live because I see them all the time around my house. And, I interviewed probably 20 people. One of the questions that we had to ask is, do you want help? Do you want somebody to reach out to help you to provide services? And probably half of them said they wanted help. The other half said that they didn't. And of the half who said that they wanted help, there was really no good way to get a hold of them because they didn't have phones. Some of them had email with limited access. So there's, there was a group of people that did want help, but they were hard to reach. But then there was also, I think, more people than I expected that just didn't want help at all. And so that's one of the questions I'm struggling with is what do you do with people who don't want help? What do we do with that? Do we just let them do what they're doing, or what's the answer there?
Well, and just to chime in and to try to help keep you guys a little bit on track, because I think, there is a Housing First subcommittee and there's a lot of focus on homelessness, at the whole commission level. I really think the goal for this committee is to think about how to boost the supply to address like what Marianne's saying, right? With the, it's like, I did a bunch of research a while back kind of regarding, we have numbers of who we know are experiencing homelessness. So why don't we have that many, do we have that many number of beds? I think thinking more strategically about, what this skill set of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee is, which is really development, right? And supply, just thinking about what are things that we can do to boost that supply, knowing that obviously, Jim, there's like you said, there's a like broader, bigger issue of homelessness and how we deal with it, but I don't think that's your purview in this subcommittee necessarily. It's more to focus on, is there anything that you all can come up as experts in development that can help with boosting the supply to address these issues? So maybe it's like, maybe, you know, one of the things is, you know, just randomly off the top of my head, a goal is like just boosting the number of beds, right? But in emergency shelter, but also in more transitional before permanent supportive housing. And maybe that's a goal. And then thinking about how to do that. And like, you know, another example, when you mentioned zoning was necessary. So, you know, California has done a lot of work with this where they create housing needs assessments, right? We have a housing needs assessment that's happening. Some of that has some input for, you know, shelter and transitional types of units. But then, you know, that's kind of the point is then what does our zoning allow? And I think zoning is a big piece here, right? Our emergency shelter zoning piece is a big barrier. And I think one thing that California did was basically say, if you have this many homeless people based off of your point in time count, then you need that many beds, right? How are you going to get that many beds? Do you have zoning that allows the development of additional beds? And so then it's sort of, they get into that, you know, issue of changing the shelter care of the zoning code. And I think that's something you guys can include in here as well, because I think it's not just the funding, right? How to build it, all that, but then also like, where is it allowed to take place? And so maybe if you guys focus on sort of those topics. And not the crux of homelessness as the giant issue that we all know that it is, and we can get totally hung up in that weed, but maybe just trying to use your brains on what are those key pieces that you know are a hurdle to developing it and creating that supply.
Okay, very well said. Thank you, Sarah, for keeping us on track and out of the weeds of needs.
Yeah.
So I
So,
think
go ahead.
what she has said about zoning, you know, being a more friendly to shelter. And then, you know, a shelter working within the neighborhoods. So both of those I think are real in terms of boosting the supply. But then I'm coming back to this living environment. We're just talking about boosting the supply, but I think that in terms of working with homeless people, we do need to create environments that allow them to recover.
Right. Like permanent supportive housing is really intended to be that, right? That you come out of homelessness. You even think, Marianne, it's different than permanent supportive housing. It's like an in-between even type.
No, so before all that, permanent supportive housing doesn't do the job that by putting people in separate apartments and sometimes getting case management. This is part of what, you know, Maggie and Compass has experienced with supposed permanent supportive housing actually working. I'm talking about environments that are built for groups of people who are in need of similar recovery. That allow them to have rooms, if you will, their own private rooms, but to be able to do group work, individual work, medical work, to be able to managing their meds, all that kind of stuff in an environment that is with similar people and the isolation isn't there, that happens in permanent supportive housing. And we're not worried about landlord tenant issues. Because this is a population that is going to have landlord tenant issues if we put them in traditional housing, even in transitional housing. This really needs to be an environment that's a bit different than a shelter because they have their private space, but it's also communal enough with like-minded people who are, working through similar aspects of their lives in order to be able to take that next step, which may be transitional housing, or it may be permanent supportive housing, in which they'll be much more successful. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you this action plan, Marianne, and let you try to. I'm not sure how to write that on here as a task.
Yeah, all right.
So it needs to be concise enough that we can communicate it with the rest of the commission.
And are you guys supposed to report out on this like at next week's meeting or?
I think so.
Oh, okay. You
So
don't get another
Sarah, Everin, and Serena, can you grab what I said and make it
No.
concise and
This is your homework. I think that, this is part of the thing of the commission creating tasks for yourselves to do. I'm going to hold you to it that you have to do it. I think maybe what you guys could do is work on this separately and try to get your thoughts into it based off of what you all feel separately.
Agreed.
And maybe even just take that all there and it'll be a discussion there,
Well, maybe we can just do it between emails between Serena, Maggie, myself, and Jim,
Yeah.
and try to hone it down. I'll try to hone down what I just had to say.
Yeah. I think do that. And then that way, because I think you guys could talk for hours about it. And I do want to try to get into this middle housing meeting. And so I might abandon you all anyways. But
Great, in our time of need.
you'll be fine. But I think, yeah, if you guys just do that, I think that'll be good. And then you can all bring that back to the full commission next week.
So Jim, Maggie, and Serena, how about if we all have one on this? We don't want to have a bunch of goals, right? But somebody in this group is going to have to pull everything that we say in together to create an objective outcome.
Right. So I've taken a first crack at it. I'm gonna email this to the three of you, and if you guys want to redline it and then send it back, I'll try to pull it all together into a single document.
And I think I like what Sarah said. We're boosting one of them is boosting housing options, but the other one is boosting recovery options or something like that. So, all right, thanks.
All right. So I will send this to you guys here in just a minute. I do think one thing I would like to add before we finish this topic is I think we should take a position when we know a little bit more about this property tax proposal in the county. And I think we should look at it and try to provide feedback on it and help the city formulate a position with it as well.
Okay.
All right. So should we go to the call to the audience? I don't think we really have anybody here, do we? There's nobody listening.
There's nobody in the attendees.
Okay. All right. So our next meeting is scheduled for June 18th. Does that work for everybody? So Marianne, are you done? Is this your last meeting?
No, my last meeting is in July.
Okay, all right. So does June 18th work for Serena, Maggie, Marianne? Is this good for you three?
Let me see.
Think so.
Yeah, I think June 18th works for me.
Yeah, it's on my thing yeah, I've got it.
Okay, and then we've got the next full commission meeting on the 5th. Is there any other
On the
agenda items?
5th.
June 5th? For the full commission?
Oh, I'm looking in July, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next full commission meeting is June 5th.
Right. Okay, and
And-
then,
And Jim, just a heads up real quick, you guys already did send a letter of support to Pima County for the 3 cent thing.
we
Yep.
did?
Yeah,
Did I do that? I did that, didn't I?
you did do that,
I did
Oh.
it too.
or you guys did it,
I
yeah.
think I did that. I think I did that personally, from my company. I don't think I did it on behalf of the commission of the city. of
Yeah, we
Tucson.
did it from Compass Affordable Housing.
Well, Rachel told me that I think that we did submit a commission letter of support and she helped draft it.
Oh,
Yeah, we did submit one and we
Oh,
had
okay.
Jay sign it.
yeah, that would be Jay and.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
good. I wasn't aware of that. Okay,
Yeah, and it's still important, Jim, I think too, I'll just reiterate, it's still important to continue advocating for it.
well, I think, the real thing is we want to make sure the city gets its fair share. It's got what, 60% of the county's population is in the city? Right? Something like that?
Yeah. Like, that's my question is like, how much of that is like it to be used in the city, right? And how is that gonna be divvied up?
Right. Yeah, so I think we need to maintain some sort of involvement from that perspective. All right, do you guys have agenda items for our next meeting?
I think honing our action plan.
Yep, so I'm gonna send this out as soon as we're done. And I'll try to ping
And
everybody
then-
else.
Perhaps, Sarah, are you gonna be available at our next meeting?
No, this is my last meeting with you all.
Okay, so Everin?
Too happy.
Can you come back to us with information and maybe work with Sarah on this regarding the city's zoning requirements with shelters?
Wait, ask that one more time. I'm sorry, Marianne.
So for our next meeting, could we get some more detailed information from the city regarding its zoning requirements with shelters?
Yeah, and I will, yeah, we could add that to the agenda. I'll work with Everin. I did a bunch of research early on it. I will just easily say flat out, it's the use specific standards that are the biggest pain point for shelter in the zoning code, right? Like a shelter can't be 1,200 feet from another shelter. Why? Who created that rule, right? And like, is that a necessary thing or not? And it has to be 500 feet away from a residential zone district, and like, there's a lot of things. So I have all that prepared, and if you guys want to see that, we could have that at the next meeting.
Yeah, that would be a yes, and then any best practices that you found, like you mentioned California.
Yeah.
And just to quickly chime in about the next meeting, I mean, it sounds like I think I'll be the liaison, although Sarah, I don't know if we're 100% on that.
Yeah,
Maybe you have.
Yeah, I don't think we're still 100% sure, but I think that's
Yeah.
cool.
But in any case, I won't be here on June 18th.
Sarah, it's you then.
Well, yeah, I might be able to do that.
Okay.
We'll
But
figure
we can, yeah, I mean, I can work with Sarah to send things in between. I think we had also done a little bit of research about things that they're doing in Portland
Yeah.
and in Seattle as far as best practices go. So,
Yeah.
as far as sending things between now and then, I can chime in on that, but I won't be available on that day.
Okay. And then, one of the things that I'll put on here was the thing that Maggie triggered. Unless you want to put this on, Maggie, which is, having, government providers or DES, DHS and access to be, and Home Inc. to be more specific, be the leaseholder, versus, individual people. Right. Do you want to put that on, Mag, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to wait until we can do that, but I was thinking of somehow putting it into the template thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Somehow,
The
yeah.
template. Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking. Sorry, going back to the template. Do you want to add that to the template?
I think so, but then I'll wordsmith it. I'll try to figure that out because I do, going back to, what Sarah was saying, I keep on going back to trying to go back in the thought process. And it's the who, it's the ultimately, it's who is providing the funding for these things that I think they have to become a little bit less rigid. A little bit more collaborative. I don't know. And like I said, stop, passing the buck. Because I'm wondering how many agencies or providers have withdrawn or, chosen to get out of these types of services because of what I've talked about.
Right.
It's cost prohibitive. It's really, it's passing that cost to the nonprofits who really can't afford it in the long run. And then being penalized, I just felt it was so petty.
Okay.
All right. So I sent you guys the action plan
Let me see.
template. You should all have it.
Find that.
Got it.
So if you could comment before next Thursday. Doesn't
Yeah, I
go
think
too long.
we throw it out to each other. Let's see. Whoa, what happened to it?
So is the priority topic homelessness?
I don't know. Maybe
Our
not.
subcommittee is housing options. Yeah, I think it is homelessness.
Or is it like to be drilled down a little more? I don't know. I don't think we're
The
just
priority topic is homelessness. That
Yeah.
came out of our meeting.
okay.
Yeah, that's like the main focus area for the commissions, and then each of the subcommittee have like a piece of that. So I think, yeah, affordable housing subcommittee is more focusing on, yeah, like housing stock and like zoning.
Boosting housing.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, Jim, thank you for doing
All
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. We're gonna go ahead and adjourn, I guess, and we'll pick this up next couple weeks here.
Okay,
All right. Thank you.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice
Bye-bye.
evening.